Hi everyone, and welcome to our bi-weekly session with Bernhard. How are you, Bernhard? What's new?
I'm great, Alex. Yourself? How are things?
I'm in the middle of renewals, so I'm having lots of fun. Um, but both from the fact that a lot of the ideas and hypotheses that we are discussing here are being confirmed real life. And all the effort, like all the activities that we talk about, they all pay off. So it's very invigorating to kind of live through, from theory to actually significantly improving the quality of coverage by doing the kind of the things that we preach. So,
Exactly.
it's not,
Yeah.
it's no longer hypothetical, like everything is real. And well, I mean, it was hypothetical in like 2021 when I first tried it, but it's like different companies, different years, different geographies, different lines of insurance, principles kind of that we've put into ScyAI still hold true, which is, quite encouraging.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful. And also like when I ask you, right, like a little bit how was your experience with regards to limit changes, right? For what kind of business lines you used, Sci, right? And I'm just like when you come back then with the numbers that you give me, right? I'm just like, hey, that's fantastic, right? But people are not gonna believe us initially. So because it's so amazing, right? It sounds too good to be true. So I was like, hey, how are you going to frame that, right? That people actually get it, right? Like, because like it sounds like super high, right? But this is literally what we have been seeing, right? So we still have to crush through that kind of wall of resistance where people just like, hey, that sounds too
Yeah.
good to be true.
So you have no idea, because I have a WhatsApp chat with like 300 risk managers and insurance managers, and out of spite and arrogance, I always share my successes there, and like without a doubt, like literally, as soon as I go, how much we are improving the coverage, the limits, and the rates. Um, I get a response back saying like, "Oh, it's soft markets," and I'm going like, "Come on, guys, really? Is it all it is? It's soft markets. You can yeah, you can save like 5-10%, and so I'm all about data and confirming the point. So I've actually sent AI agents to do like a benchmarking research, and they found quite a lot of broker reports where they try to kind of consolidate. Okay, well, soft markets. I mean, yes, we are kind of in the moment of where more capacity is available. Although, when you're talking about mining in Brazil, it's a little bit, less soft than other industries in general. But anyway, um, the benchmarking tells that like the soft markets can explain maybe like 5 to 8% of the reduction.
Exactly. And then we're not talking about like, I don't know, 10% improvements or 20% improvements, right? I'm not going to say
Exactly.
the numbers here, but in the end, like it's just like completely different ball game. And yeah, I just like when I hear you talk about that, right? I just like directly think, hey, you have to set up a ranking at some point, like maybe like it's gonna be a private one, right? Like among users and stuff like that, similar to your WhatsApp group, right? Where people a little bit can post and compare. But yeah, it literally sounds insane here.
Yeah. And I've the insurance rates that I have seen um, are like triple what we're seeing. So like 300% higher than what we're seeing. So anyway, life is beautiful, and it's a lot of effort, but it pays off. And it's only a lot of effort because we're still rolling out ScyAI. Because I for my previous renewals I had to do all of this manual, and it's like months of work, and I dreaded it personally. Like it's so funny. because today, last time we talked about shortlisting brokers and separating the markets. Today we wanted to talk about submissions, and I'll unpack that. But before we kind of talk serious about submissions, I had a hilarious story. I did a submission for a liability insurance, and I sent it to the broker, and the broker kept like sending me back questionnaire and asking me to like copy paste few things from our super comprehensive, very risk-based submission into this, obscure, very poorly structured, high-level questionnaire. And I got like really upset, going like, what is going on? I'm giving you like this diamond, and you asking me for this piece of garbage, that you're asking me to convert the diamond into a piece of garbage. I'm going like, what's going on? And luckily, before I kind of lost it, he explained that the legislation in Brazil recently changed, and this is just how this is just how clueless legislators are and I've seen this in every country, in every application. So the legislators wanted to protect the companies, and give the companies the benefit of the doubt. So basically what they wrote in the legislation is that the pricing and the insurance coverage should be risk-based, and whatever you put in the questionnaire, whatever information you share with the insurance company, then it is considered in court that you've informed them and they made the pricing and the limit judgment based on like all of this available information. So somehow it kind of gives you the companies extra levels of protection when the insurance company tries to claim that the risk wasn't covered, or that they were not aware of the risk. They use this kind of questionnaire as the evidence in court. The irony of the whole situation is, because the kind of the premise, the idea is the right one, but instead of making like a broad statement of risk profile or risk description, something generic, they explicitly said questionnaire. And so now all the brokers and the underwriters, they are on the lookout for a questionnaire. And they don't care about the quality. Like nothing changed about the quality of the risk. Like nobody still cares about your underlying risk profile, but they care that there's a tick that they've received the questionnaire. So I'm not kidding. What I've done is I've taken my submission, I deleted the word submission on the front page, and I said questionnaire. And it's like a full submission, multiple slides with a lot of like deep dives into specific risks and controls. I obviously didn't do the rubbish questionnaire that the broker sent, but the bureaucracy and the kind of the mindless following the law without really understanding the intent or the kind of the goal behind it. I mean, that was just ridiculous. But it was so funny how I kept sending him like really this like literally a diamond of presentation of risk profile, and he kept asking for a questionnaire, and he goes like, and I need to send the questionnaire to the underwriter because that's what they'll use for pricing. And I'm going like, how is that making sense? I'm giving you a diamond that describes the risk explicitly, and it has all of this amazing information that is useful to the underwriters to better appreciate our risk. And you keep asking for some paperwork.
It's brilliant. That's brilliant. Yeah, and I love it. Like, because in the end, like it becomes like just like a big questionnaire, but any point that you have in your submission, you can just like phrase as a question, right? So it becomes quite straightforward. I love that.
Yeah.
And with AI, obviously, like you can kind of actually quite straightforward, right? Change the formatting, right? Change some of the settings and how it's perceived, etc. And then it aligns again with the local requirements on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's the one of the next features in ScyAI, where downloads the submission in the format that is acceptable by the local insurance market
Exactly.
automatically, and you don't even have to think about it. But yeah, that was so funny because I didn't even change the content to sound like a questionnaire. I literally just changed the title.
That's brilliant. Yeah, but the tick box is now ticked. Huh?
Yeah. So yeah, that was a bit crazy.
Brilliant.
All right. Before we kind of deep dive into submissions, conversation, and best practices for communicating risks, any thoughts, any ideas, any recommendations?
No, I think like in general, just like super excited about that part, what we're going to talk about the submission piece today. I think just like as initial framing, I think what we have both seen in the market in general, like when I also was still at Swiss Re, we kind of coined step by step like this part around like, hey, you want actually as a corporate, you want to have like a digital twin. But it kind of started out, hey, you're gonna have like your assets, like you have like your insured values, everything like in one kind of central digital twin. And I think just like my first observation here is like, it's funny, I'm talking to like these huge companies, huge Fortune 500 companies, and this coin that we had there for risk and insurance management kind of like went through now. They're like they're using certain tooling, be it from Swiss Re, Munich Re, etc. But the scope, right, remained with regards to the term. It stayed like just like similar to a row in an Excel sheet of, hey, this is your information, your lat long, your street address, and stuff like that, and then you further augment it. And that's what the market right now sees like as a digital twin for the insurance and risk management part. And for today's conversation on submission, I'm just like super excited also to maybe touch base a little bit on like what our view is on that, because ours is like I would say like 10x wider, our definition, right? And it becomes really a true 3D digital twin of your assets itself, but then also of the overall coverage of the asset reality, of covenant requirements, right? Lender requirements that you're compliant on that front. So I'm just like excited to talk also about that piece.
Yeah. Well, some of that may migrate into the following weeks when we do a call, because there's just way too much to unpack.
True.
On the submission, I have like almost like a checklist of the things that we typically try to cover, but rather than giving just the checklist, kind of sharing it on the screen, I wanted to almost like brainstorm to it, so collectively we kind of recognize what are the important things to cover. And if you're watching this live, or if you're watching this in replay on YouTube or LinkedIn, write in the comments checklist, and then I'll send it to you in the messages, and we'll publish it, I think, as a kind of as a ScyAI recommended checklist for writing submissions if anybody wants to keep doing them manually. So the big premise behind the questionnaire originally, and I think submission is like the next evolution of a questionnaire, because the questionnaires don't really do justice to the risk profile of the organization. They don't give you sufficient flexibility or space to explain your risk. The main premise is to basically help underwriter understand the risk profile, and that means both the exposures and the existing controls that the company has in place. So understand the risk profile in the way that allows them to price this risk fairly. Meaning, if it's a high risk, it should be priced as such. But if it's a lower than industry average risk, or lower than the location average risk, then it should be priced accordingly. So that's the premise. It's an attempt to explain to the underwriter the quality of risk, the risk profile, and the in the perfect world, you would have the underwriter actually visit the site and spend 2-3 days there, walking around, talking to people, and kind of seeing the key exposures and key controls live, because nothing really beats this in-person feeling, walking, going up and down the stairs, and just trying to kind of really get a feel for the asset. Obviously, this is both expensive and time consuming. So that means if we can't have a physical visit, which, by the way, if you can, you really should. It's a good idea once you kind of shortlisted few underwriters, or at least who the most interested candidates are. I always recommend spending some time at the plant. It makes a huge difference, and I've spent many days with the risk engineers from the insurance companies at our plant, trying to really kind of visualize and get a physical feel for each risk. So that means if we can't really be there physically, we have to find a way to visualize the different risks that are relevant on paper, or virtually, which is one of the big kind of premises behind ScyAI, where we're trying to visualize not only the location but also kind of the overlay of different risks on that location, so the underwriter looking at the asset can actually get a feel for how the plant operates and what are the different risks. So that's the first premise. Any quick comments on that, Bernhard?
I had to unmute myself. No, not really. Just like later, I'm going to want to also present a little bit like the underwriting view then on that, but you go ahead.
Yeah. So that's the first thing. Our goal is to help the underwriters understand, visualize, and appreciate the risk profile of the asset or assets, multiple assets, whatever you're placing. For example, usually when I do a roadshow, I start, like the first 5 minutes while everybody is getting on the call, I just have like non-stop drone video of the asset floating around and just kind of showing it and showing the location, the neighbors, the operations, the kind of the natural hazards that may be around the forests, the rivers, just kind of showing the good drone visuals of the plant. Okay, so that's the first kind of idea behind making a good submission. It's making it very visual. The second important idea is that underwriters have what's the word I'm looking for? They have limit and authority within bounds, but also within their own companies, they have to seek approvals and justify their business case and the pricing and the conditions, especially if something is not standard. So the second kind of subliminal message, the second idea behind the submission is we're trying to make underwriters' job easier to quantify the risk and price the risk. It could be a matter of plugging it into their internal pricing calculators. It could be plugging it into the internal models. It could be helping them write memos and approval requests and messages from, for example, local underwriters in Brazil to Switzerland or to Munich or to London. So the second kind of big point is to make underwriters' life easier. So find a way to present the information in the format that they can use for their internal purposes. That's the second kind of, subliminal message, the goal. And then the third one is to build a fair and comprehensive understanding of the actual risk profile. For example, if you don't have sprinklers in a particular building, it's important to explain that there is a fire hydrant just outside, and maybe not as good, but it doesn't mean the risk is still big. Or maybe it's explaining that the neighborhood liability is not a thing because there's like kilometers of forest around and there are no neighbors, there are no farmers that could raise liability claims against. Or explain that flooding is river flooding is not a thing because the plant is on the kind of on the hill, significant mountain compared to where the river is down at the side.
Exactly. Or also, right, like you have river flooding, like on the underwriter side, it shows up in their model. But in the end, like you have to also understand like these models sometimes have like big lags until they get updated again. Like the government just last year built like a further dam, right? Invested heavily in fluvial flood protection, and the underwriter maybe doesn't have that yet in the system. So you can help them with the endorsement and actually share this information.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, exactly. That's a really good point. What we're trying to say is that nobody really knows your risk better than your operational team and your project team and your safety team and then your environmental team. And that, I mean, that uncovers, I think that unpacks a very, very important message, because the reality is most insurance managers and most risk managers don't really have a good immediate grasp on the risk profile of the actual asset. The kind of the reality is that most risk managers and insurance managers probably haven't been at the plant either. Not just the underwriters, but they haven't been at the plant. And so, one of the key lessons that I've discovered is that you really should. Yeah, if it's a significant plant, if it's a significant location within the company, you have to spend weeks there, understand the risks, walk around, talk to all the people, understand where the fire related hazards are, where the biggest electricity dependencies are, the warehouse, how are the materials stored, the fire protection, the kind of the weather protection, and so on. So understanding the risk profile by ourselves is super important, but I think what it unpacks is that risk managers and insurance managers rarely have the information at the tip of their head, like at the tip of their fingers. So, and that's again something that we're trying to change with ScyAI quite significantly, because we are trying to create a digital twin which not only stores but contextualizes anything and everything relevant to understanding the quality of risk and the risk profile of each location within your company. But initially, it usually takes significant effort because you want to ask for information and get something from safety team, from environmental team, from finance team, from procurement team, from electrical team, from operational and maintenance, from project, from business continuity, from IT, and cyber teams as well. So collecting all of this is a part of building a quality submission, because only by presenting kind of your specific risks and controls, you can start building this narrative that the quality of the risk is unique, it's different. And that I think is kind of the ultimate idea, is we want to be priced at our uniqueness rather than as a generic mine somewhere in Brazil, because all the
Exactly.
mines are different, all the technologies are different, all the locations are unique and different, and the risk profiles are different. Now, the arguments, the kind of the counter argument that I usually hear is that, well, what if we discover that our risk profile is actually really poor quality? Like, what if we discover if our plant is old, outdated, corrosive, with poor fire protection? Well, that is a huge risk management finding, and then you can use that to find and seek and get approval for budgeting for maintenance and for for risk mitigation and risk prevention, or you may have the shareholders confirm that they accept this risk, and they may choose to retain the risk exposure and not insure it at all. The kind of the key message, and what I've been discovering, first of all, I've done, I don't know, dozens different plants and mines, and I have never discovered that our knowledge made things worse. Like, not a single time. It just like it just never happened. And we've had some pretty poor, run down mines in Eastern Europe. So and yet, how insurance companies were pricing this was still so much worse than what it really was. So even for like a really run down mine, when we communicated that well and we got repriced on the insurance, it still had like a 20% savings,
Yeah,
which was
in a nutshell, right, Alex, is like this uncertainty gets always priced like in the worst path, like as if
so
you
much
would do
higher.
nothing, as if you would do
Yeah,
nothing. And also to play a little bit devil's advocate, right? Like you mentioned, like one counter would be normally, yeah, okay, what if my risk is so much worse? You actually address that, right? But then also the other piece, right, like that you mentioned and alluded to, like, hey, it's really important to go to these plants, right, to look at it, etc. Maybe we have now some listeners. I cannot do that. We have 30 to 50 plants. I wouldn't see my family anymore if I would just like travel to all of these plants. Also there, I think like the super important piece is we can, to some extent, like if you focus on the most important ones, that's good. But also now with AI, with satellite imagery, with building these 3D digital twins, etc., we can actually explore it also remotely and actually do these assessments to some extent, like even without being there. It's not perfect, but also there, ScyAI, for example, helps now massively, right? You can create like this, I would say, familiarization. Did I get it
familiar.
out?
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. With the site, but then also what you want to do, you want to provide this context, this picture for the underwriters, right, for the market. So it doesn't stop with you. This is like also like then the further augmentation into the market.
yeah, exactly. The discovery of how the asset looks and feels, and how the plant operates, and where the different locations are. I mean, it's like every single time, I get excited about this, because every single time it's like some sort of new surprise. For me, it's always fascinating to see how the production line goes and where the actual buildings are located. There's a lot of illogical things, how the material goes like all the way here, and then it goes in the middle, and then it goes back, and kind of it goes like almost in unnecessarily complex directions, as opposed to like straight line. So you discover so much insights and knowledge, and then you try to understand, okay, why is this happening? What are the kind of the risk implications? What are the mitigating factors? Does it actually make sense because it reduces certain risks? And then you have so much ammunition and confidence to translate that to the underwriters when you explain the risk to them. I mean, that's essentially what we trying to do with digital twins. We're trying to discover the uniqueness of the risk, so we are then in a perfect position to explain and translate that to the underwriters. And again, whatever kind of blockers or counter arguments you have in your mind, by all means write them in the comments. But I'm yet to discover this logic of trying to understand and better communicate risks, I'm yet to discover any downside to that whatsoever. Like it pays off in terms of quality of coverage, it pays off in terms of cost of coverage, and it pays off because it allows you to redirect the savings from the insurance into the actual maintenance and operation. So you ultimately improve the resilience of the plant through this exercise. So, in my experience, it's all upside. All right, so on the submission, so the three ultimate objectives is to visualize, help underwriters do their job easier, and then explain the risk profile, meaning explain the exposures, which exposures are real, which exposures are completely irrelevant, and explain what controls are in place and how they operate, how they work, and what are the different backup systems, so the underwriters don't have to make assumptions and don't have to guess whether something exists or not. And so to address these kind of three ultimate goals, what I usually spend a lot of time doing, and this is something that, this is the months and months of work that we have been doing over the years to save you that time, and we've kind of already preloaded it and trained ScyAI exactly on that. We spend a lot of time trying to understand what are the levers, what are the trigger points, what are the actual specific risks that underwriters are on the lookout for. And what I'm discovering, it's always a balance of two things. There are kind of default things that they include in the models and the pricing, and there's a lot of, every year there's like a different flavor of the month. Usually somewhere in the world some sort of incident happens, and then all underwriters suddenly get excited about this, this one specific risk, and
Excited
they
or
want to
scared?
know. Well, don't get me started on that. They start to get irrationally feared of that one new risk, and so it's because we're building a product for them, and I mean the submission is the product. Because we're building a submission for the underwriters, we can't ignore it. Like, we have to be conscious about it, even though their own internal models give them like 10 questions to answer. In the back of their mind, they have this 11th question, which is new, and it's nagging at them, going like, okay, is this a significant risk for this company? And it's our job to preempt that and to explain it, and to put their mind at rest that this risk has been controlled for the last 15 years, and it may be a problem for somebody else, but it isn't for us.
And I think,
so
Alex,
that's
here, right,
interesting discovery.
the analogy is great storytelling, right? When you are on stage and you create a great story, you want to directly address like the questions that pop up of the actually to be presented to, right? And I think it's the same thing what we want to do for the underwriters, right? It's literally like answering like this and preempting these questions that you just like mentioned.
Exactly. And a big part of this work is also benchmarking against the kind of the current policy to make sure you unpack and explain in your submission the key risks that are covered by that insurance, but also explain and provide additional information on some of the exclusions that may be default in the policy. Because if one of the exclusions actually turns out to be a significant risk for your specific location, you do want to at least attempt to renegotiate that. You do want to unpack. You don't want to have a conversation about it. And that's again, this is like a super valuable exercise, trying to understand what risks should be covered, what exclusions are there in the wording, and then trying to kind of map that against the physical reality of your location. And I think we're doing something wonderful in trying to align the policy wording with the physical reality in ScyAI. I mean, that is so powerful, because when I was doing this manually, that takes ages. Like that takes a long time to figure it out. And then the other, of course, big layer on top that Bernard, you mentioned, is sometimes if you have financing from banks or external providers, they come in with extensive covenants on what they want to see covered in insurance. Some of us are lucky, and we only have like a single covenant for insurance, which says the company should have insurance which is reasonable for the type of company that they are. I love those. Sometimes we're not so lucky, and we have like 15 pages of requirements, specific risks and specific like sublimits and everything else that need to be covered. And that's also a big exercise, trying to kind of align the external requirements to the current policy, to the underlying physical risk reality. And sometimes it may mean that the covenants need to change because they don't reflect the physical reality on the ground, because again, they've been drafted by lawyers at the time of the transaction. And sometimes insurance advisors, none of which have ever been to the site. So they've done their best to draft the covenants, but they may or may not reflect the actual physical risk. So that's an important exercise as well. So submissions are wonderful piece of work, because as I'm usually drafting them, and by the way, sometimes it's a Word document, sometimes it's a PowerPoint presentation, sometimes it's an HTML interactive, digital twin, and sometimes it's a full AI agent that stores the digital twin in its brain, and then it can answer questions, and it can show, demonstrate, and describe the risks and controls.
Exactly. No, and I get super excited about it especially when we talk about like where we see it going, right? Or when you, Alex, talk about in a perfect world how you would want it to work. And they always like come back to how we create this digital twin, which at some point is going to be like a representation that both you as the corporate insured, but also the underwriter and the insurance companies can actually agree, hey, this is actually our baseline that we're gonna price your risk based on, right? And once we achieve that, like we're going to have like proper risk quality and pricing for that piece, etc. It's still a long way, but I think like we already like made like miles and kilometers on that, right? To make that happen, step by step.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, an amazing world we live in, where I think we've confirmed beyond any reasonable doubt that specificity, detailed information pays for itself. And the good news is that with AI, we can now actually do it, because it used to take I used to have 4 people in insurance, and it used to take us months, 4 months, 5 months of like non-stop work just to prepare, to collect the information, to discover, to structure it properly, to present it, to document it in a way that is understandable, to figure out how to present it. Again, we live in a weird world, because every year I would ask the broker, how, what the submission should kind of convey, like how should it look, and every single time I get like a very tip of the iceberg type answer, where they give me like the obvious things, but the obvious things are not really helping to communicate and to explain the quality of the risk. So then I have to go through this discovery of many interviews with underwriters and other companies and other brokers, many interviews, and almost like try to build this, puzzle together to then fill it with details and then use that for communication. But it's a fascinating story. By the way, in my submissions, the typical that you would kind of expect to see, like the claims history, that is literally less than 5% of it. Like normally you would think, okay, what shifts the price? And claims history is obviously something that shifts the price. Well, in my experience, it's less than 5% of the overall message, of the overall information, and there are so many kind of more important things that are worth discovering and explaining. And so I think we'll turn this little checklist into a downloadable, and we'll just offer it on the ScyAI page for download.
Brilliant. Yeah, and then it's always astonishing, right? Like when you talk about that, how you did it manually in the past. If you think about the A team, and we had this discussion last week, Alex, right? Like the A team that you would need for that, like to do that end to end, you would hire risk engineers, CAD modelers, wording counsels, pricing actuaries, I don't know, data engineers, placement specialists. The list is endless. You go on, and insurance counsels, compliance analysts, and all of that, right? Like to maximize and have the A team in place, to have coverage that pays for fair price, right? And being also compliant with any lender requirements and stuff like that. And with regards to that, like, I'm just like, I'm super excited to push further on this. And this was just like me sharing now a little bit like my thoughts around like what you just shared, going from manual to this insane leverage that we have right now.
Yeah, exactly. It's great. But the funniest thing is that technically speaking, if you were to hire as a head of insurance, if you were to hire 7 people with like a dedicated risk engineer, dedicated lawyer, insurance lawyer, actuary, quant, and placement specialist, so like ex-broker. If you were to hire all of them, and we know how much they were, like they cost in the market. Plus you add like taxes and social benefits, so it's like double the actual salary. But even if you were to hire them and pay all the associated costs, you would still save more on insurance. So like technically speaking, you can actually go ahead and like expand your team, and you would still be net positive, like NP positive for the company, for the shareholders. So imagine if you do that same thing at the fraction of the cost, like your NPV positive is huge
Exactly.
to the shareholders. And the important message of that is that you free up that capital from insurance, and then you redirect it into the actual risk mitigation, and that kind of starts building up the resilience of the organization. So it's essentially like you improve the fire protection and the flood protection and the electrical safety and the health safety of your operations, but doing that using freed up capital. So it's not actually asking for more capital. It's just you reallocating the capital that previously would have been spent on insurance. I mean, that's the whole purpose of risk management, is better capital allocation and better use of capital.
Creating the resilience flywheel and
Yeah,
creating a competitive advantage for increased resilience.
exactly. Okay, well, we're gonna wrap up soon for today. Any thoughts you did want to share something from the reinsurance perspective from the other
I
side?
think we covered it super well. Just like what I wanted to highlight again, right? Is just like imagine you would sit on the other side of the table, right? Like you guys, the corporate risk and insurance manager, you know the risk quality. You have been on the side, like you work on this every day. So you have the full context, you have the full picture. And Alex shared a bit already now, like how he makes also like the underwriters in the market feel and understand like the risk, right? You show like the different drone imagery, right? Like you can show satellite imagery, etc. You want to help them actually understand and build up this familiarity, right, with your risk quality and with your risk. And then on the other side of the underwriters, right, we already touched a little bit on it. They then have to have the information right to get their own endorsements. They obviously have certain underwriting appetite. They have competence to underwrite certain things, but obviously for certain things they have to also get endorsements to give you a better price. And there we want to really aim to bring like the right information at the right time and enable them to actually get like these endorsements. It's the same thing, like it starts from very simple things, right? That they can apply the right modifiers in their models. Be it like, for example, natural catastrophe models, you want to have like you want to provide the right modifiers. If you have like hurricane hooks on your roof, this actually can lead to 10% plus risk reduction on hurricane risk and stuff like that, right? You want to enable them to be able to actually apply these modifiers. And that's our task here, right? Like our task is to share this risk quality, the controls, etc., in a format that they can use then. And that's where ScyAI comes in again, where we already know like what format they want it. And that's the beauty of it, right? Like with the digital twin, that we step by step can make that happen.
Exactly. I think that's perfect. What shall we talk about next? We can talk about roadshows a bit, and then we can talk about wording and the actual placement. And I think we can talk about what happens in the middle of the year and how important it is to communicate the kind of the changes in risk to the underwriters as the company evolves. Sometimes I don't do it as well as I should, and I just love seeing the underwriters' eyes going like, oh yeah, by the way, our revenue has quadrupled since the last forecast. Because by the way, the US government created this whole new industry ex-China. They have different pricing, and there's different separation. Like it just the industry evolved so much. It's a completely different world, and I forgot to mention it, and now I'm kind of discovering this. By the way, we live in a completely different world. I mean, exciting things.
100%.
But it's all positive.
Exactly. No. And I think it would be super cool, like next stuff, right? Like going from exhibition to the roadshows, right? Like, and a little bit doubling down on that. And then, as you mentioned, right? Like once we go further, like from roadshows, like it's more like, hey, how to update the underwriters and the different things once it's bound, etc. I think like we have quite like a schedule ahead to talk about.
Exactly. Thank you, Bernhard. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Alex.
Keep sending your questions, and if you want the checklist, comment underneath, and we shall see you in 2 weeks.
Brilliant. Have a good one. Ciao, ciao.